Senator Booker, I think, should practice what he preaches, because this is the kind of moment. You cannot have a professor who wants to teach students and is going to desire to kill half of them. You certainly cannot have law enforcement officers who would engage in this kind of violent rhetoric against half of their constituents. So long as anyone stands by an endorsement such as that, their words are meaningless. They are shedding crocodile tears on the topic of political violence.
I turn back, and it's like there's a Cory Booker shaped hole in the wall. You know, his chair could have been spinning around, and it was very, very odd. I think he knew that question was coming, so he didn't want to ask it, or he didn't want to be there for it, rather. But likewise, he couldn't skip out on the political violence hearing. To me, Sean, this is the dilemma that the Democrats are in right now, which is they talk such a good talk on political violence, don't they? And yet, the minimization, justification, downright celebration after Charlie was murdered, and of political violence more broadly, was widespread on the left. It wasn't just some fringe lunatics. It was on TV. It was from elected officials. And so I think they're between a rock and a hard place, because celebrating political violence is not a fringe view for the Democrats. I think it's actually pretty mainstream. I think the polls bear it out.
All right, guys, good Friday. Happy Halloween. I didn't dress up. Sorry. You know, I didn't have time. I didn't know what I should be. I hope you guys are doing something fun tonight. Watch the show, then go trick-or-treating. Michael Knowles is here. I'm excited. He testified on Capitol Hill this week on political violence, and it's a great topic with a great guy who's been so involved. He's all around good friend of Charlie Kirk. He's been at college campuses. Plus, we'll get his take on Arctic frost, obviously, and a lot of the other stuff going on. Trump was back at the White House. Listen, I mean, honestly, 6 days away, 3 countries, major meetings, a big deal with China, and he flies back, lands on the ground, and instead of being like, I got to get some sleep, says, hey, let me go entertain kids of service members, et cetera, while they trick-or-treat around the White House. Pretty darn cool. I thought so anyway. If you're wondering when the shutdown ends, because we are at day 31, I got some bad news for you. Democrats got polling telling them to hold out. I'm not kidding. It says, with all the talk in the Senate to being able to find a way out of the shutdown, House Democratic leadership showed polling to their rank and file members in a bid to keep the government closed until they get a deal on Obamacare. This comes as states have declared emergencies to deal with a lap in SNAP funding, the federal program that helps feed more than 40 million Americans. That goes into effect tomorrow. So next time you hear them bloviate, know that this is their strategy. This is their strategy. Just don't let them kid you. That's the strategy. By the way, a big announcement. Tuesday night is election night. New Jersey, New York, Virginia, and Prop 50 in California, as well as some other stuff here and there. We are going live at 8 o'clock Eastern. My buddy Dan Turntide from the morning meeting will join us, and maybe some other guests. Who knows? We're still working on it. But 8 o'clock, get some results in. Join us here. We'll break it all down for you as we're getting the results in live as we go. I'll take your comments on YouTube and other platforms if you have them. But this is where you want to be on election night. As I mentioned, Michael Knowles is coming up. Great testimony that he gave in front of the Senate. Next week, Jim McLaughlin will join us on Monday to break down the latest polls 24 hours out of Election Day. Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he'll be here. Curtis Hook of the Media Research Center to break down Corinne Jean-Pierre's book tour Disaster, and then Victor Davis Hanson next Friday. So a big week. It is Friday. We do our our shout outs obviously on Friday. Paul Taylor, 3169. John Solomon is the best when it comes to accuracy. The Last Min Mom, 5251. Love this show, Sean. That's John Solomon one. R. Coleman, 5675. Go, John Solomon. A wonderful show. Thanks, Sean. And then Lucky Dog, 557. Great show. Book John's once a week. I would book him once a week. I literally get John Solomon as much as I can. He's that good. By the way, speaking of watching the show, seriously, huge help. Thank you to everybody. Wherever you're watching, go to the other place. If you're an audio person, you're listening on Apple and Spotify, go over to YouTube. Please subscribe, Apple, Rumble, and YouTube. It helps the show growth. We're an independent broadcaster. We need your help. And vice versa. If you're a video person, get some backup. Go to the audio version on Apple and Spotify. Give us a 5-star review and just subscribe. It don't cost you anything. All right, before I bring in Michael Knowles, I've talked to doctors before about trying to get on a journey to wellness. A lot of stuff that they give you is the basic advice. Eat slower, walk after meals, avoid the processed foods. I got it. But even when you do all that stuff, sometimes you really don't feel balanced. And then I discovered colostrum. It's nature's liquid gold. It's the first milk that babies get packed with proteins, growth factors, and peptides. It supports immunity, reduces inflammation, helps heal your gut lining. And cowboy colostrum offers the highest quality bovine in the U.S. It's sourced from the first milking of 100% grass-fed cows. It's full fat, never over-processed. You get maximum nutrients and real results. They've got 3 amazing flavors: strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. I'm a big fan of the chocolate, just so you know. There's no artificial flavors, just clean, delicious support for your gut and other wellness. And for a limited time, our listeners and viewers get 25% their entire order. Just go to Cowboy Colostrum. That's Cowboy, COLOSTRUM, cowboycolostrum.com/Sean. Use code Sean at checkout. Cowboycolostrum.com/Sean, code Sean at checkout. By the way, once you do eat, you know what I'm going to tell you, right? If you're a snacker and it's the weekend, look at this. I got a bag that I crushed of the blue masa chips, and I'm going to eat these this weekend, the original. These are amazing. Masa chips, 3 ingredients that come with these things. Corn, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed tallow. All stuff back in the day. Snack food used to be covered in tallow. And then they were like, hey, seed oils are better. And guess what? They're not better for you. They might be cheaper for the big food guys. Masa, no way. Masa chips are entirely cooked in beef tallow, no seed oils. So they're crunchier, they're tastier. You don't feel bloated. You feel satisfied when you eat them. I'm not kidding. I love these things. And they come in all sorts of flavor. Highly recommend the variety pack because they've got lime, habanero, the original blue. I'm not kidding. If you're going to do this, get the variety pack. Masa Chips is beloved by thousands of people. It's totally Maha approved. If you want to give them a try, go to masachips.com/Sean. Masa, M-A-S-A, chips.com/Sean, and use code Sean. Remember, Sean spelled the right way, S-E-A-N. Go give them a try off your first order. That's masachips.com/Sean, code Sean for 25% off. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in Michael Knowles, the host of The Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire. Michael Knowles, welcome back. Good to see you.
Excellent to see you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel so honored. I see you clips from the big Senate testimony going everywhere. It looks very professorial. Like, let me just take viewers back for a second. Like, how did this all come to be?
So Senator Schmidt wanted to do a committee testimony on political violence. And I think that's obviously very timely. Political violence has been building and increasing for a long time. A Pew poll shows that 85% of Americans think that political violence is getting worse. Obviously, it reached a climax with the murder of Charlie. And so it was a very important testimony. The committee was great. The Republicans show up. The Democrats, by and large, don't show up. So you had the ranking member, Peter Welch, showed up. Dick Durbin was there for a minute. Padilla was there. But I noticed there were some notable people missing. Adam Schiff, who I think is still sobbing crocodile tears over January 6th, the worst day in human history. He couldn't be bothered to make it to the political violence panel. And then Cory Booker. And Cory Booker was the most notable exception because Senator Booker continues to endorse Jay Jones, this Virginia candidate for AG, who has fantasized about murdering Republicans and the Republicans' kids, said the kids should die in their mother's arms, fantasized about urinating on the graves of Republicans, said more cops should be killed to change policy. I mean, just horrific stuff. Every sensible Democrat has either not endorsed or withdrawn his endorsement. Cory Booker's standing by it. So what was amazing was he wasn't there. He then shows up, uses up his entire 5 minutes just to bloviate. And he doesn't even ask questions of the minority witnesses there. He just speaks and then bolts apparently out the door. So anyway, we're listening to him. Then Marsha Blackburn asks a question. And I say, look, what Senator Booker said is
oh, wait, hold on. Let's just do this. Let's play exactly what
we have the
said.
clip? Okay.
Hey, listen, we come prepared, brother.
This is a professional outfit.
Yeah, this isn't the Daily Wire. We come professional. We come ready. We borrow all the Shapiro folks for our show with you. All right, play the clip. Let's let everyone hear what Michael said about Senator Booker and Blythe. Take a look.
I think Senator Booker made a good point just a moment ago when he said we have to self-examine. We have to be introspective. And, I can't help but think of a line today. Jay Jones has the vision, commitment, and integrity to keep families safe and make sure every Virginian gets a fair shake in the justice system. I'll be working every day to ensure Jay wins this race. That's the endorsement of Senator Booker for a man who would seek to be the Attorney General of Virginia. This is a man who, if people have not been reading the news, has called for a Republican to be murdered, for his children to be murdered, for the children to die in their mother's arms in order to persuade the Republican to change his policy views, and a man who says that he would urinate on the graves of multiple Republicans. Senator Booker, in this spirit of introspection, is standing by this endorsement. So I suppose I would invite, well, perhaps I should have looked, because Senator Booker has left the room, and I think I can guess why. Senator Booker, I think, should practice what he preaches, because this is the kind of moment. You cannot have a professor who wants to teach students and is going to desire to kill half of them. You certainly cannot have law enforcement officers who would engage in this kind of violent rhetoric against half of their constituents. So long as anyone stands by an endorsement such as that, their words are meaningless. They are shedding crocodile tears on the topic of political violence.
Now, when you started that, did you think he was still there?
So he had just completed his statement, and he says, what was so shocking about it, what actually tipped me off to it, was he says, not only, is political violence bad, he says, we need to take some of our words back. We need to we need to be introspective. I've said things, whatever. So he's insinuating all of this. My jaw is dropping, but he doesn't ask any questions. So then my head turns to Marsha Blackburn, and you can see, people do sometimes come and go in the committee hearings, so you don't always notice when someone leaves the room. But then I'm speaking to Senator Blackburn about, she'd asked a question about professors. I said, well, look, if Booker isn't going to ask any questions, I can't let him get away with this. This is the most hypocritical speech I've heard out of the Senate in a long time, and that's really saying something. I turn back, and it's like there's a Cory Booker shaped hole in the wall. His chair could have been spinning around, and it was very, very odd. I think he knew that question was coming, so he didn't want to ask it. Or he didn't want to be there for it, rather. But likewise, he couldn't skip out on the political violence hearing. To me, Sean, this is the dilemma that the Democrats are in right now, which is they talk such a good talk on political violence, don't they? And yet, the minimization, justification, downright celebration after Charlie was murdered, and of political violence more broadly, was widespread on the left. It wasn't just some fringe lunatics. It was on TV. It was from elected officials. And so I think they're between a rock and a hard place, because celebrating political violence is not a fringe view for the Democrats. I think it's actually pretty mainstream. I think the polls bear it out.
So why, what I've been trying, I've given my theories on this. But 4 years ago, when Governor Ralph Northam in Virginia, the sitting governor, wore blackface or dressed in a KKK outfit. We can't tell which he was in that photo, but we know he was in it. Every Democrat, including Abigail Spanberger, former governor and current Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, all said he had resigned. Yep. Now no one from Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat running for governor here in Virginia, nor Cory Booker or anyone else, refuses to acknowledge someone trying to kill someone else. What is the Michael Knowles theory as to why? Why is it that you can say you must resign as current incumbent governor if you say dress in blackface from years ago when Northam was in med school, to suddenly now a current I want to kill somebody is not as big of a deal?
To risk a cliche, I think the Democrats have crossed the Rubicon. And I think they crossed the Rubicon when they tried to prosecute Trump, when they called Trump an existential threat to the country, which is itself a justification for assassination, which did very nearly occur, after which many of them made light of it or minimized it or even joked about it. So I think they're just a little bit too far. And you saw a lead up to this in the BLM riots. The BLM riots left dozens of people dead, over $1 billion.
They were, Michael, I can't let you get away with this. Those were peaceful. They were mostly peaceful.
A little fiery, a little touch fire, but mostly peaceful. What's so amazing too, Sean, those riots don't show up generally on the counts of political violence, certainly not of left-wing political violence. The reason I was called down to testify by Senator Schmidt is because I had a speaking event at the University of Pittsburgh. 2 Antifa operatives showed up and threw an explosive at a crowd of people, seriously injured a cop when I was walking on stage. Luckily, one of the guys at least was prosecuted and put in jail for a small amount of time. it was not classified as left-wing political violence. And so it became clear. The old line from the left was that all the political violence comes from the right. Then that was very difficult to support. Even The Atlantic had to admit recently that political violence is mostly a left-wing problem. Now they're trying to say it's both sides, but I just think they realize we're too far gone for that. And when you have a huge portion of their base saying that they justify political violence, I think they're captured by their base. They're too far gone, and they're quite afraid that, it's that old Baudelaire line that was reiterated on The Wire, which is, if you come at the king, you best not miss. And they missed. They missed with Trump. Trump not only literally survived, he survived the prosecutions, he survived the impeachment, he got reelected with the popular vote. And so the Dems are kind of out of political options, and they seem to be all in on violence.
The minority witnesses that they called, what was their position that there's no, what were they saying? That there's no violence, or it's different, or it's both sides? Like, what did they have to offer to this discussion?
They had two words to offer: January 6th. That was it. It was just over and over again about January 6th. And I noticed the Democrats on the panel didn't want to interview any of the majority witnesses about this, because so much has come out about January 6th since then. One, Nancy Pelosi took responsibility for the chaos on camera. Her daughter filmed it. Two, we know that a lot of the people there were escorted in by the police, including the horn hat guy. Three, while they pretend that January 6th was the worst offense ever in the history of the country, it wasn't even the worst attack on the Capitol. Just here off the top of my head, 1915, a left-wing Harvard professor blows up a Senate reception room. 1954, Puerto Rican radicals shoot up the House gallery. It seriously injured 5 congressmen. 1971, I think it was, Weather Underground blows up a room in the Senate to protest the military. 1983, the Maoism Armed Resistance Unit blows up a room in the Senate. So you got 5 attacks on the Capitol. 4 of them involve explosives. 1 involves a silly hat. The 4 of them that were explosive were all on the left. So even if they're trying to argue that the Capitol attack was something special, even there, most of the violence lies on the left. It was very silly. The one other thing that a minority witness said was he was apparently in charge of some anti-extremism group for the federal government. And he was complaining that Trump defunded this group. And so you had the Democrat senators arguing that this is crazy. At a time of political violence, you're the man who knows how to stop it. How would Trump want to defund your group? And I thought, well, hold on. Trump comes into office. He sees that political violence is getting worse. He sees that most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, think political violence is getting worse. The political violence was perpetrated even against him. So whatever the government was doing under Biden clearly wasn't working that well. It was a farce. And so I think the Democrats on the panel knew that they really had nothing going in. And for at least half of them, it didn't even make sense to show up.
You know what seems to me of interest, and I know, again, they don't classify it probably as political violence, but when that Luigi Mangione killed the CEO of United Healthcare, and people were setting up defense funds for this guy, I thought that was really, to me, the moment that I went, you've got to be kidding me. No matter your policy differences, the idea that you celebrate killing a human being in cold blood, never mind the fact that this guy's a father and whatever, I mean, like, And yet no one on the left denounced it and said, guys, no. In fact, to your point, the left doesn't own that event. They'd say, well, that you don't know who did that. You still don't even know who shot President Trump. That could have loved Trump. I mean, that's how they'll answer that.
What happened? Bill Burr, a left-wing comedian who has been funny at times in his career, Bill Burr goes on one of the network late-night shows and he screams, "Free Luigi," and the audience applauds. I think we've seen so many hints of this, so many figures of it. It really, the scales fell from people's eyes after Charlie was murdered, when they saw it, not just lunatics, as I mentioned, but, I guess still lunatics in mainstream positions, but, people in government, people in the media blaming Charlie, saying it didn't matter, celebrating. And then furthermore, just looking on Facebook and looking on Instagram and seeing people that they know, the girl they went to 9th grade with, or their coworker or something, who were making excuses for it, or even celebrating a right-winger who's gracious in debate being murdered. I think that just opened people's eyes to the fact that we might not all just be singing Kumbaya and trying to talk it out, especially you look at someone like Charlie. He was the most prominent figure trying to talk it out. He was killed for it, and people celebrated his murder. So, at this point, I think we're done having these try hard kind of debates about it. What is called for is law enforcement really coming in. I think that's what Senator Schmidt was advancing. The White House has been trying to advance this. Even to your point on the fundraising, Sean, the two people who came and threw an explosive at my event, they weren't just ordinary citizens. I mean, these were two card-carrying members of Antifa. The Torch Antifa network claimed them as members. I could tell you the email address that they were using to solicit donations through a tax-exempt nonprofit organization. So if the government can go in and break up the Ku Klux Klan, can go break up organized crime, the government could break up organized left-wing terrorism. Heretofore, they haven't wanted to. And I think at this point, we've said, okay, enough's enough. We have to do something about this.
You mentioned campuses. And I know you go to a lot. I saw the clips and the story online when people were sort of discussing your story of political violence and your history of having it thrown at you. I tell people that, like, when I went to speak, I did a bunch of events through the Young America's Foundation. And so I would go to different places. And I'm not kidding. When I would get the briefing, two things. One, I would always know where I was by how many armed guards and the security plan. Like they'd say, this is the exit that will go out if you're attacked. But I would always ask the administrators, okay, explain to me what the process is. And normally it would go something like this, and I want to hear your experience. The first time somebody, has an outburst, we say, please finish quickly. The second time it's don't do it again. The third time we give them a final warning. And then if they rush the stage or do anything, we will escort them out. And I literally said at one point, I go, so it takes 4 times. And they would say to me, Mr. Spicer, these people have a right to object. And my answer back was absolutely. But the people in the audience also have a right to hear. Yeah. And so I was literally at Northeast Illinois University. I believe that was it. And some dude rushes on stage. And I'm like, what point do you guys think that I have the right to be safe? I spoke at Berkeley. Honest to God, that might have been one of the scariest experiences because they're explaining to you all the safety measures they're taking in place. And I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I've seen it at a number of schools, but even to your experience, Sean, at Pittsburgh, which was the campus in conversation on the Hill, not only were there the explosions, they burned me in effigy, lit the street on fire, the buildings were placed on a soft lockdown. But at one point, you had a group of people start screaming in the room, and the campus just kind of let it go on for a little while. At one point, a person masked up, looking really fidgety, really weird, starts walking toward the stage. The campus does basically nothing. My security team started moving in on her, and she finally took her seat. But there was not a sense of urgency. This was after an explosion took place. This was after police had been injured, multiple police officers injured, one in particular. Clearly the campus administrations don't really care that much. You can't blame the cops who are working the job. This is coming from the top. And so, if the campuses are not going to protect civil organized discourse on campuses, what are they for? Why are they getting federal funding?
Don't you think I think it's because it's a chilling effect, right? So when somebody says, honest to God, Michael, I know, I try to be funny about things, but being burned in effigy, that's not funny. I mean, that's pretty scary stuff. I've had threats, I've had someone rush the stage, but I've never been burned in effigy. And I got to be honest with you, I don't like fire. I don't.
It's better than being burned in real life. I can assure you of that.
Okay, fair. But I honestly, I think part of this is just to be don't come back. Tell your friends, this is what we did, and this is how we'll treat you. But I've seen, I think it was Riley Gaines and a couple other women chased and have to lock into rooms. Yeah. And the idea, first of all, that's the worst. And I'm not blaming them, obviously, but when you put yourself into a tight room with 1 or 2 egresses, that's not safe. And that's where you got to worry that someone's going to batten on the door.
There was one time years ago, I was speaking at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I was giving this speech. People are shouting, screaming, whatever. Someone tripped the fire door in the back. And I guess there was a plan in place because another guy busts in and squirts me with a squirt gun. And I don't know what was in the squirt gun. I don't want to know what was in the squirt gun. The police took him down. The only real casualty was my jacket. I remember I went on Fox a day or two later, and Pete Hegseth, now Secretary of War, said to me, He said, Michael, that's really, really scary. And I said, oh, I'm okay. It was just a squirt gun. He said, that's not the point, because it might not have been a squirt gun. The fact that someone could enter that way, clearly wanted to harm you or, come at you in some kind of way. And I took it a little bit more seriously then. And we've seen so many incidents since, including, Riley being chased down, plenty of other people, being assaulted. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, what are we going to do about it? To your point, when they say, hey, these people have a right to object, you say yes, but students have a right to learn. Speakers who are invited have a right to speak. And so there has to be some kind of order. I come down to a basic question. What's the university for? It's to educate people. It's to pursue the truth. It's to form them into civilized young people. If there are elements that are not going to permit that or that are going to undercut that, they need to be expelled. If there are professors who are going to encourage this kind of violence, they need to be fired. Senator Blackburn made a good point that the University of Tennessee did precisely that in the wake of Charlie's murder. If there are universities that are just not going to keep the peace, you're seeing this with the Trump administration's fight with Harvard, then those schools need to lose their funding. But enough is enough. In some ways, we say politics is downstream of culture. There's a lot of truth to that. But also, the law is a tutor, and we have a civil authority for a reason. And if Republicans are not going to wield power in a just way when we have power, then what's the point of it? What are we electing them for anyway? The Republicans came in here with a mandate to address just this kind of disorder. And I think it's a great thing that at the White House and Capitol Hill, they're actually doing something about it.
I said to I do this morning meeting in the mornings, and after Charlie's assassination, we were talking about this, and someone came on and asked me, and I said, "Look, I'm going to just do a quick little test with you." He was a student at some university, and I said, "If you put a Biden-Harris T-shirt on, aside from the fact that you might look silly, would you face any threat walking on campus?" He said, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
He said, "If you put a MAGA hat on and walked around campus," and his answer to me was, "It's less dangerous now." Less dangerous. And I said, that's the point. When you can't feel safe expressing yourself, that's the bigger problem. And so I wonder, to your point about what's next, like, because I think, one, there's a chilling effect on the ability to have a discussion. We keep saying we need to have discussions. They don't want to have it, right? That's the fundamental thing. I will have a discussion with anybody. Michael Knowles will have a discussion with anybody. I think Matt Walsh has made movies about having discussions with people. Ben Shapiro will have discussions with anybody, I think. I mean, like, pretty much he has talked about within our own side, some people being very intolerant of issues that he cares about, but willing to tolerate them, discuss them, debate them. I fundamentally believe, Michael, that the problem is they don't want to have that discussion. They don't want to acknowledge folks on the right. That's the difference. I will engage with the biggest leftists in the world and go back and forth. I will let them talk about any subject they want. They don't want to engage or acknowledge people on the other side of the ideological spectrum.
They don't. And so the only thing that we can do is to educate them. Using the law in some cases, and sometimes using prisons if they break the law. But we have to educate them because, as you point out, Sean, we want a marketplace of ideas. We want the healthy exchange of speech. That's in some ways what our government is predicated on because we have a self-government. But you can't have a marketplace of ideas or anything else if bandits keep shooting up the marketplace. Marketplaces of ideas, just like any other marketplace, require some kind of rules, some kind of regulation. We all have to agree to how to behave within it. And so I think you're completely right. They say we don't want to engage in that, and we don't value your ideas at all. We think you need to shut up. If you don't shut up, we're going to kill you. Stephen Bonnell, who goes by the nom de plume Destiny, very popular left-wing streamer, after Charlie was murdered, he said, look, Republicans need to be afraid of getting murdered when they go out so that they can turn to their leaders and tone down the temperature. And they need to have a healthy fear that they're going to lose their lives. And I think, all right, well, that kind of person really doesn't belong in our public square. That kind of person actually needs to be excluded. The exclusion of those kind of people, those kind of suicidal ideologies, that doesn't shrink the public square. That actually expands it. This is why there are exceptions in the First Amendment for fraud, for direct threats, for fighting words, for obscenity. It's because all those speech acts actually undermine rational discourse. And we need to get a little bit heavier, I think, a little heavier handed about making sure that we do have a healthy marketplace of ideas and the people who would undermine it are excluded from it.
You mentioned Cory Booker and his endorsement of Jay Jones. The speaker, there was a delegate in the House of Delegates. They got called back to Richmond because of this scam to try to redistrict. But, obviously the delegates can speak about whatever they want. I want to play you what happened on the floor of the Virginia House of Delegates and how the Speaker of the House, a Democrat, responded. Take a look.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us in the Capitol today are members of Moms Saying No to Violence Against Children, a group dedicated to protecting Virginia's children and calling out those who use them as pawns in politics. If they're in the gallery, I don't know if they've made it in, please rise. Mr. Speaker, our children are Virginia's future, the heart of our families, and a gift from God. These mothers understand that sacred duty. Their mission is simple: to ensure every child grows up safe, healthy, and free from hate. When anyone, especially a public figure, wishes harm on a child, that they die in their mother's arms so that they can win a political point, these moms refuse to stay silent.
The delegate is out of order.
They rise,
the
they
delegate
speak,
is out of
and they
order.
remind
Sergeant
us
at
all
arms,
violence
the delegate
against
is out of
children.
order.
Michael, the delegate's out of order because she doesn't think it's appropriate that mothers should have to have their dead kids in their arms. She didn't name a name. He knew what was going on, and he called the sergeant at arms because he was scared of people hearing what Jay Jones had said. And again, she didn't mention his name. He knew, though, what was going on, and he didn't even want that to be acknowledged.
If he thinks that the delegate's out of order, just wait until he hears about Jay Jones. Just wait until he hears about who actually said those words first. Yeah, I think they're terrified, the Democrats, because they refuse to disavow the AG candidate, and they refuse to disavow him, one, because they're just so desperate to hold on to power, and they or to regain power in the case of that race. But two, and this is, I don't think this is a cheap partisan shot. I've tried every which way to come to a different conclusion. The other reason that they want to cover that up is because a lot of them and a lot of their constituents, a lot of their base agrees with Jay Jones, and they don't want to disavow it because they're on the same side.
Well, I'm going to take it one step further for you. That Speaker of the House is a convicted felon. That Speaker of the House spent 7 years in jail. 7 years in jail for drug dealing. So I think he probably just agrees with Jay Jones.
Yeah.
That he says, hey, you know what? That's not bad, So I think that's the problem. And you know what? He probably wants a compadre in the Virginia leadership. He says, hey, how cool will it be the next time I do something nuts that I can get off because my buddy Jay Jones doesn't think anything is the problem.
How did we go from Thomas Jefferson, the great statesman of Virginia, to convicted felons in the state house? Good grief.
I want to go back and say, you mentioned January 6th. And what we've learned since then, we've now learned a lot because of Senator Grassley and others about this Arctic frost. 430 Republican organizations and individuals getting targeted. What do you think about that and where we are now in terms of what we do to correct it?
I'm shocked, but not surprised. I think that should be the attitude of most Republicans. I am shocked because it's shocking. The scope, the depth, how close things actually got to a real curtailing of all American right-wing activity under Biden. But I'm not really surprised because they did prosecute Trump multiple times, and they did try to kick him off the ballot, and they did prosecute nuns, and they did, imprison pro-life grannies, and so I'm not surprised in that way. But this should be the final antidote, I think, to the squishes on the right who say, well, by golly, we don't want to be indicting Democrats who have broken the law, and in some cases related to Arctic frost. Because if we do that, just the minute the Democrats get into power, they might do the same thing to us. Yeah, they did. They did that. They did that about as extremely as it is possible to do that. So the options, look, you might say, I don't want to live in a political culture where the government is weaponized against enemies and politicians are prosecuted, but we do. That's it. Politics is the real world. It's a practical science. It's not a theoretical science. So you can either engage and have the courage to try to advance a good substantive vision for the country, or you can let the Democrats have another crack at it next time. Arctic Frost 2, Electric Boogaloo. I fear there are some squishes who really want that, but I think most Republicans realize, okay, we're in a different political order. Now's our moment to try to right the ship, and if we don't, we basically have no one but ourselves to blame.
So speaking of your movie themes, you mentioned Arctic Frost, Electric Boogaloo. I'm thinking one of the other things we need to revive is Weekend at Biden 2. And this James Comer has come out with a stunning report about what everybody knew at the time, because he's actually got now, as the kids like to say, the receipts. He has actual testimony. And then they've got actual emails between some of the staff where they're saying, hey, what do we do with this? Because we can't prove that the president actually reviewed some of these important actions. I got to be honest with you. You want to talk about shocked but not shocking? I'm actually both on this one.
Yeah.
Like, I got that he didn't work a lot, but I would have assumed that they would have been like, guys, we got to run it by the boss. The idea that they're admitting in emails and in testimony that, you know, we kind of didn't really know if he was alive or not.
Sean, I know you hear a lot in the rumor mill of DC. Even I from Nashville, you know, I go visit the swamp every so often. And I remember during Biden, I heard a rumor, and I didn't talk about it publicly because I didn't have any real corroboration of it. I heard a rumor, and now I even forget the details, that someone went to Biden and was complaining about some executive order, some provision, something that damaged his industry, whatever, and that Biden had no idea what this guy was talking about. He wasn't even playing cute and, you know, trying to evade response. He said, I didn't sign that. What are you talking about? And at the time I said, that's interesting. I'm going to tuck that away in my mind. Knowing what we know now about the auto pen and about Biden's apparent incapacitation for a large part of his presidency, it obviously rings true. And there was obviously a lot more of it. And this is not unprecedented in as much as Woodrow Wilson was incapacitated, another terrible Democrat president, and his wife appears to have basically run the country during a lot of his term. But it's rare that we have this kind of thing in American politics. And so there is a question. Are the executive orders legit? You know, are the pardons, for instance,
Yes.
Are they legit? Does it count or no?
I listen. I think I asked this to John Solomon the other day. Neither of us are lawyers, but I said, because the pardon power is absolute, right? Meaning that if the president says, I deem Michael Knowles to have a pardon, there's no check, no balance. It just is. Yeah. But it has to assume to coming from the executive.
Right.
And if we can prove, or if someone can say, we can't show that he ever knew that happened, then yeah, I got to question whether that's legit. But I mean, but beyond that, Michael, the other question I asked John Solomon is, we see all of these emails and we've got now some testimony of people saying like, it was like Oz behind the curtain, right? How do we go get this approved? We don't want to scare the man. And I said to John Solomon, like, but we all knew at the end of The Wizard of Oz, they pull back the curtain and there's Oz. You're like, wow, it's just a little dude, right? I mean, that was the dirty secret. What I said to Solomon was, we don't even know who the little dude is. Was it Mike Donnellan? Was it Steve Ricchetti? Was it Anita Dunn? Was it Jill Biden? But how do we not know who is actually running the country? We know all of these staffers never interacted with them for weeks on end. So who was running the country?
In a way, it was a kind of a fulfillment of Woodrow Wilson's vision, because Woodrow Wilson had this view that the presidency was too big for any one man, and he wanted this blob kind of bureaucracy just to fill it out. I guess that came to fruition 100 years later. We almost certainly never will find out, though. You know, there's this reckoning, even within the left. You'll recall that the ratings for the left-wing cable networks, they dropped precipitously after the last election. It wasn't because conservatives tuned them out. It's because the liberals had been lied to. They had been lied to about Biden's health. They had been lied to about Kamala Harris's chances of beating Trump. They'd just been lied to about everything, and they wanted to tune it out. So Biden's spokeslady, had your job and did not do as good a job at it as you did.
She never had the job. She had a title.
She had the title, and she was sometimes up there on camera. But she was on MSNBC the other day, and they say, okay, KJP, do you regret anything that you said during the Biden presidency? And that's kind of a softball, tough question. You know, it's introspective, but it's kind of, do you have any regrets? She could have said no. She could have moved on. And what did she say? She said, you know, I am a black queer woman. I am a black lesbian. That was her answer to it. And that was the explanation, I think, of why she was never fired from that job. Joe Biden was so upfront about the identity politics, even in the choosing of his running mate in 2020. And that's all they're going to say. I mean, they have no explanation. Anything they say is more damning than the last thing. So, they've got their story and they're sticking to it, which is they're privileged, they're beleaguered, they're oppressed, they owe nothing to anyone, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's unsatisfactory for even for their own voters.
As you're saying that, I those times when somebody like walks into somewhere and they go, "I'm sorry, we don't have any seats," and you go, "I'm a founding member," and they go, "Oh, you're a founding member, come on through." I feel like that's the response that KJP. They were like, "We have a question for you," and she goes, "I'm a queer black woman." Oh. Okay, sorry. We'll just pull out the crudité and,
yes.
Would you like a spritzer? It was like, sorry, we'll stop with the questioning and just promote your book now.
Ma'am, I had no idea.
I had no idea. I'm sorry. You're a founding member. Really?
I think it's some of those nice clubs in DC. I got to try that, where I can't get in. I said, listen, hey, I'm a black queer woman. Where is my
I identify as one.
Yeah.
Maybe I should use that. I identify as a black queer woman, but don't you think the other piece of this aside from the cover up, the idea that the media, think about the breadth and depth of the story. You mentioned Wilson and you've got scandals throughout, Whitewater and Nixon and Watergate, right? The idea that you have through testimony now, not conjecture, testimony and emails, a question as to who was running the government of the United States. And the Washington Post is just they literally, one of their headlines the other day was about how MAGA women are disappointed in the single guys in DC. And I'm like, no, that's literally not a joke. That was a big story in the Washington Post, how MAGA women that moved here for Trump too are disappointed in them. And I'm like, okay, or the country wasn't run for 4 years. Look.
Obviously, you got to run with the lack of virile men in D.C. There's a simple explanation, which is that we're looking at yellow dog Democrats. Everyone knows about the blue dog Democrats who no longer exist. Maybe John Fetterman is trying to revive it, but those kind of more moderate Dems, they're basically all progressive. And it's the yellow dog Democrats, which is they'd vote for a yellow dog over a Republican. And so they don't care, really. And to some degree, I sympathize with them. If they really believe that Trump is Hitler and he poses an existential threat to the country, then sure, who cares if Hunter Biden's running the government? At least he's not Hitler. And that's their view. And if it's a little illegal or a little extra constitutional, or if some of those pardons are a little suspect, they're just going to deny till they die. They think that the juice was worth the squeeze, and they're going to move on. And frankly, they would probably do it again.
Pam Bondi says we're going to get accountability. Do you believe that?
Hope springs eternal in the human breast, to quote Alexander Pope, but I'll reserve my optimism until we see receipts. And it's no knock on Bondi, by the way. It's just a fact that the corruption was so widespread, it was so deep. It would take years to unwind all of it. If we get any action, any accountability for the political corruption that we saw going back all the way to Crossfire Hurricane 2015, 2016, I would be happy with that. But I wouldn't bet the farm on total accountability. I don't think there's enough time.
Two more things for you. One, we're a few days out now from this New York election. The Democrats elect Mandami, which I think, who knows? Cuomo may pull it off. But if either one wins, what does it say about the Democratic Party that this is what the greatest city in frankly, I think, on the earth has come to?
It's telling that Mamdani would not win without foreign-born New Yorkers. If the election were only held with American-born New Yorkers, then Andrew Cuomo would almost certainly be the mayor. So it's telling because it starts to make people think about mass migration, and it starts to make Democrats think about mass migration. That's something we haven't seen really in our lifetimes. All growing up, there were two views you could have on immigration. The first was the Democrat view that illegal immigration is good and legal immigration is also good. And then there was the Republican view, which is that legal immigration is really good and illegal immigration is bad. There is a third view, which is that we've had too much migration. That's not true in every era, but it's kind of true now. You know, the movement of people into America over the last 60 years is the largest movement of people in recorded history. We have the highest foreign-born percentage of the population throughout America that we've ever had. And in New York, it's something like 40%. So you just can't have that. At a certain point, you don't have any social solidarity. You don't have any kind of political community anymore. And if the silver lining to the storm cloud of a Muslim communist becoming the mayor of New York is that finally we're going to have a Democrats think more seriously about immigration, I guess I'll take it. But it's really nauseating because it's America's greatest city. Yeah. It's my home city. You know, I try to get back as often as I can. And I think it's probably going to be a ghost town pretty soon as every semi-reasonable person is going to flee for freer pastures.
All right. Last thing I want to ask you. You testified this week about political violence. Charlie Kirk was a friend of yours. You've been critical and influential in the movement on college campuses. Erica Kirk and J.D. Vance spoke at this amazing Wednesday night event. When you look at the future of what the movement is, and based on your experience and your travels and what happened Wednesday night, if you look in your crystal ball, what does Michael Knowles see for the future of the young conservative movement?
What Erica has done is superhuman. The fact that she took the reins, and she's really the only person who could have taken the reins of the most important young conservative organization in the country, that she did that days after her husband was killed. I got to spend a little time with Erica. We went, visited, sat in for the show one day, and obviously there have been a lot of events. Charlie and I were supposed to host an event together 12 days after he was killed. I ended up doing it solo with an empty chair. But what she has done is superhuman. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And J.D. Vance is the only political figure, I think, who could hold that coalition together, because Charlie did the job of like a dozen people, and he did it very well on every front, the debating and the fundraising and the activism and the campaigning and everything. But the most important thing he did for the politics was keeping the coalition together and expanding that coalition. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one figure who has the platform and the stature and the vision to do that right now, and it's the vice president. He did it beautifully. I mean, he subjected himself to the open Q&A of over 10,000 people. His answers were pitch perfect. I would not have changed a thing. And so, I'm really gratified to see that. Obviously, he's got other things on his plate, but it's really, really important. And I think he did his buddy proud. And I would shoot straight with you if I felt that we were in grave turmoil, or if the young conservative movement was just going to dissipate, and there was every possibility that could have happened. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think Charlie built an amazing infrastructure. I think Charlie had some really good friends who are helping to lead it, and I'm glad people are taking it seriously because as of right now, I think the future is looking bright and clear. You never know the future. I don't actually have a crystal ball, but I think the stakes of the political fight have never been clearer.
Yeah. Michael Knowles, thanks for being so generous. Congratulations on fantastic testimony and scaring Spartacus out of the room this week at the here. So I appreciate what you guys are doing at the Daily Wire, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Great to see you, sir. See you next time.
See you soon. Take care. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great weekend. Remember to hit subscribe. I got a brand new column out at SeanSpicer.com. Big week next week. Jim McLaughlin going to break down the polling on Monday. Victor Davis Hanson. We got a big week ahead. We'll see you back here on Monday on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.